Well, thank you. Perfect. I love that you took us back to 1 year ago. That's right. I forgot that we had lost power that morning. That was exciting. And that just shows, that just demonstrates our resilience and our ability, which is perfect for a perfect example for the conversation we're going to have today. Um, I am really thrilled to talk about courageous coaching. We're looking at building trust and unlocking potential. And a little bit about me, I serve as a faculty member in the business and leadership here at the University of Olivet. And my role here at Olivet is largely informed by the 20 years that I've spent in the private sector. My doctoral research focused on transformational leadership and coaching for the frontline workforce. And so my life's work has stemmed from my entire life of having this curiosity around the process of facilitating the emergence of the human being toward who a person is destined to become. So I function from this frame of reference that there must be more to life than this. And generally for me, that this refers to either a place of stagnation or status quo. And to me, the how I came to this, I just would work a full day on a job, and I would maybe lose myself in the work and not really feeling the aliveness of creating something that mattered, that made a difference. And I felt this overall dissatisfaction that my influence and my impact was not actually what I believed that it could have been. And so in this presentation, I would like to explore how I now make sense of courageous coaching. And we're going to weave together philosophy, psychology, transformative learning theories, and get just a broad understanding of what it might mean to be a courageous coach. So I really hope that you're able to discover insights as we explore this process of building trust and unlocking potential. All right, so let's begin with today's exploration. So, what is the true work of coaching? There's all different kinds of coaching. Ultimately, the type of coaching I'm talking about is beyond just setting goals, beyond just achieving a KPI. These things matter, of course. They help keep us get focused and achieve. But what I'm presenting here is something far more profound. I would like to look at us as courageous coaches who are actually midwives to courage. We help individuals confront a gap that is between who a person is and who they are meant to become. So in order to do that, we are putting together a map. And this map is going to show us not just a logical process from A to B, but it's actually going to help us understand the human spirit. So today we're going to take a peek at this integrated map and look at 7. I'm smiling because 7, it's so funny. This now shows you who I am as a person. 7, we're going to look at 7 brilliant thinkers, some of my favorite theorists, and how we can weave together their theories and insights into what would it mean to be a courageous coach. So we begin with hope. And we're starting with Richard Boyatzis. And I just love his most recent book, Helping People Change. And I use it in my leadership and development, or in my organizational development and change course in the MAL program. And his concept of the ideal self. So the ideal self is the magnetic north that pulls one forward. It's the vision of a more purposeful, authentic future. But the moment that vision becomes clear, this is when reality, we end up colliding with reality. And so when we have this collision, we hit what Jack Mezirow calls the disorienting dilemma. And this is a crisis that shatters our old way of being. And it's in this space between hope and disorientation that then we have our psyche's defense defenses and our psyche's defenses, they start rallying. And this is where our deeper map becomes more essential. So Sigmund Freud shows us the unconscious architecture of resistance, the defense mechanisms like repression and rationalizations that operate automatically to protect us from anxiety. And then we have Alfred Adler, who gives us this conscious playbook for these defenses. Alfred Adler would call these safeguarding tendencies, and we can actually observe these. And then we have Eric Berne, who reveals how these patterns play out in relationships through what he calls psychological games that keep us stuck in. We'll look at a form of transactional analysis called drama triangle. So this is the critical crossroad. Faced with internal resistance, a person can either retreat, fight, flight, or freeze, or they can choose courage. And at this moment, now we bring in Paul Tillich, who describes the courage to be as the decision to affirm one's existence in spite of the anxiety. And it's this ultimate act of choice that unlocks potential. So our role as coaches is profound as we explore the human being and all the drama that we get to live with. And we are the containers as coaches. So this is the foundation point, that as coaches, we create psychological safety, which is a concept from Amy Edmondson, that allows the entire process to unfold. So we're able to hold a space for the ideal self to be dreamed, for the disorienting dilemma to be confronted without falling apart, and for defenses and games to be observed with curiosity rather than judgment, and for the courage to take root. Our work isn't about bypassing the struggle, it's about normalizing it, navigating it, and harnessing it as the very engine of transformation. You'll recall we said coaching is about bridging a gap. So let's start here. Which gap are we talking about? If we start by focusing on only the problems, like the real self, we often activate a client's defensiveness. I'm going to speak as if we're coaches and clients. So we trigger what Freud and Adler would recognize as resistance right from the start. But from Richard Boyatzis' standpoint and his research on intentional change theory, it shows us a more effective path. The most powerful catalyst for sustainable change isn't problem solving, it's vision inspiring. Boyatzis teaches us to start here with the ideal self. And he says this isn't just a goal or a job title, it's an emotionally resonant, holistic vision of the person the client wants to become. The ideal self encompasses a person's deepest values, their desired sense of purpose, and how they want to show up in the world. This is a work of hope, and it answers the question, who do I want to be? So once we're able to get clear on a vision of who someone wants to be, and it's a clear, compelling, Boyatzis challenges us to get to 6 words. Then we can start, from that standpoint, compassionately assessing the real self and identifying with a clear-eyed look at our current strengths and the gaps between today's reality and the future vision. It's important for us as coaches to see that this gap is now framed not as a failure, but as a learning space. And it's this distance between where we are now to where we want to become. So this is the gap between the ideal self and the real self. And this is where we'll put a coaching plan into place. Boyatzis calls it a learning plan, so that we can start pursuing what comes from the magnetic pull of the ideal self. So now I'd like you to take note of this image and imagine. You can close your eyes and think this through, or just imagine you're standing before a magnificent ancient castle. So this is the fortress of your current self. It's the collection of beliefs, habits, and identities that you've built over a lifetime. In this fortress, it feels safe, it feels familiar. Inside the castle lives the ruler of your psychological kingdom. Oh, our egos. The ego lives here. So now you have this vision, a vision of a brighter, more expansive kingdom, right? We've been working with our coach and suddenly we have this ideal self. Like there's more to life than this. I want to reach out and do something new, be more significant, make an impact, have more influence in the world, right? That's the ideal self. But to get there, we realize that we need to leave the safety of our current castle and journey into these unknown lands. But the moment you try to open the gate, the alarm sounds, the guards rally, the drawbridge begins to rise. Why? Because the fortress. Change is not an invitation, it is a siege. This is why profound change is so incredibly hard, because we're not just fighting a bad habit, we are confronting a fully staffed, deeply entrenched psychological fortress designed for one purpose, and that's protection. The walls of this fortress are built from our past experiences. The moat is filled with the waters of our anxieties, and the guards at the gate, they are our unconscious defense mechanisms. So these are guardians, and the guardians have one job. They protect the sovereign at all costs. They are loyal, vigilant, powerful. They don't care about your potential, they care about your safety. And so they deploy sophisticated tactics to keep the gates sealed. They shoot arrows of rationalization to pick apart your new ideas. They pour the boiling oil out of projection. They raise the drawbridge of denial. They sound the alarm bells of anxiety to mobilize the entire system against your attempt to change. So, who gave these guards their orders? How do we learn their command structure? This is where we turn to the original cartographer of the human psyche, Sigmund Freud. He was the first to meticulously chart the blueprints of this inner fortress and name its dedicated guards the defense mechanisms. So understanding Freud is like getting the castle's secret plans. It allows us to see that the resistance we face isn't a personal failing, it's the predictable response of a security system doing its job. So let's prepare to meet the guards. Let's learn their names, their tactics, and how we can, with respect and wisdom, convince them to stand down and open the gates to this new kingdom. So we've established that we're not just dealing with a reluctant person, we're dealing with a fortress with loyal guards. And the question is, who are these guards and how do we work with them? This is where we must acknowledge the work of Sigmund Freud. We can love him or hate him, love him or critique him. That's what I wrote. Freud was the first psychologist to give us this map and give us this language of the guardians of the status quo. Freud's fundamental insight was that a huge part of our mental life is unconscious. It operates like the hidden machinery of the fortress with pulleys for the drawbridge, the tunnels, the command center. Freud's model suggests our psyche has three key players. There's the id, which resembles the primal wants and impulses. So you can imagine citizens of the castle who want what they want when they want it. And then you also have the superego, which is the internalized rules and the shoulds, how we should function and ought to live life. And the superego acts as a strict captain of the guard, demanding perfection and punishing missteps. And then the ego is the I or the ruler, and the ego is caught in between the demands of the id and the judgments of the superego, and ultimately the realities of the outside world. And it's the ego's job to manage the anxiety that comes from this constant conflict. So how does the ego do that? Well, it's not through rational problem solving, but it's through defense mechanisms. These are automatic, unconscious psychological strategies that distort reality to reduce anxiety. Okay, so we're going to translate this to our courageous coaching. When a person tries to move toward their ideal self, they trigger this immense anxiety. The id might be anxious about losing all their comforts. Right, I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone. That's too scary. I'm not going to do it. The superego might scream, "Who do you think you are trying to do this? You're going to fail." The ego, feeling that there's this internal riot going on, might say, we'll end up doing what it's designed to do, and that is to signal the guards, and it deploys the defense mechanisms. So a few of these guardians we're going to meet. The first one is rationalization. So this guard, who after a setback immediately provides a logical excuse. So an example would be, I didn't get the promotion because the boss plays favorites. This protects the client from the more painful truth that they may not have been fully prepared. Another mechanism is projection. So the guard who spots a threat in others that is actually within the fortress. This might look like a client saying, my team doesn't trust me. And they might actually be projecting their own lack of self-trust onto the team. And then a third one is repression. So the master guard who simply makes the threatening desire or memory, like that, oh, I dreamt of that ideal self, and instead makes that idea disappear into the dungeons of unconscious. So the client who shows up and says, oh, I forgot to do my developmental goal, might often be repressing the anxiety that might be attached to it. So if these defenses are unconscious and automatic, what can we possibly do as coaches? This is where courageous coaching really begins. And it's important to know that our job as coaches is not to storm the gates. Attacking these defenses head on only makes defenses stronger. Instead, we must become diplomats to the psyche. We create a safe zone outside the walls, and we do this through psychological safety. We give the person's ego a place where it can go, and its guard can come down enough so that the person can observe these defenses without immediate panic. We can help our clients metabolize the anxiety, and we're not we're not talking about eliminating anxiety, but helping the client build the capacity to tolerate the anxiety and to become more build up their strength so they can manage the anxiety uh, and lessen these defense mechanisms. And then also we are strengthening the adult ego. This is where we start integrating Eric Berne's work. Eric Berne helps us think about developing our observing adult ego. And so from this place, a person can then see defense mechanisms at work and say, oh, there I am again. I'm rationalizing. Um, I must be feeling threatened right now. So in essence, Freud explains the depth of the resistance. He shows us why willpower alone doesn't work. And courageous coaching then is a practice of building relationships with these unconscious guardians. Not that we're going to destroy them, but to understand that they are doing their job to protect, and they have their positive intent. And so the best that we can gently persuade and be with people on their journey as they are moving toward their ideal self is the mission. Okay, next we go to Adler. So Freud gives us a brilliant, deep blueprint of this fortress, and he shows us this unconscious engine of resistance, which are these powerful instinctual defense mechanisms operating in the basement, right, in the unconscious. And this helps us understand why resistance is so profound. But as coaches, we don't primarily work in the basement. We work with what's happening in the courtyard. The visible behaviors, the spoken words, the relational patterns. So how do we translate Freud's deep insights into the practical, observable world of coaching conversations? This is where we turn to Alfred Adler, who provides this next essential piece to our map. Adler took a different path. So while Freud looked downward into the unconscious drives, Adler looked forward. He was interested in our goals, our style of living, and how we strive for significance. And so, from this perspective, he identified what is called safeguarding tendencies. If Freud's defense mechanisms are the unconscious engine in the basement, Adler's safeguarding tendencies are the conscious strategies and behaviors that are visible, and they are observable moves that we can make to protect our self-esteem and our chosen style of life from threat. Adler would say that when we feel threatened, when our fictional goal of superiority is challenged, we engage in three types of safeguarding. The first one is excuses. So there's this classic, the yes, but. So it's this preemptive self-protection where a person agrees with a goal or a suggestion. Yes, I want that promotion, but immediately erects a barrier and says, but I don't have the right degree. It's a verbal drawbridge raised to avoid the risk of failure. The next one is aggression. So this includes depreciation. Oh, that job isn't even that great anyway, and might even accuse the boss that, oh, well, the boss never gave me a chance to succeed. It ends up being an attack aimed at devaluing the threat or blaming others. And then we have distance seeking. So this is withdrawal, procrastination, hesitation, creating obstacles. It's the decision to never truly leave the castle gates, because if you don't try, you can't truly fail. So how does this help us be courageous coaches? Adler makes resistance tangible and addressable. We can hear a yes, but we can observe procrastination. We can notice when a person becomes accusatory. This allows us to gently point to the behavior itself and explore it with curiosity. So instead of saying, you're repressing your anxiety, which would trigger the guards, we can say, I notice a lot of yes buts coming up as we talk about this goal. What does that pattern protect you from? Or here's another one. It seems like you're putting a lot of distance between yourself and this opportunity. What is the risk you're trying to avoid? This is the courageous shift. We're not attacking the person, we're actually helping them observe their own safeguarding strategies, and we're inviting them to look at uh, how they've unconsciously been functioning. So we can use Adler's concept to bring the resistance out of the shadows. It becomes more conscious, and we can uh, be more compassionate coaches ourselves. And uh, then once we understand both the deep engine and this playbook that's playing out for us, then we're in position to start seeing how this plays on the interpersonal layer. So now this brings us to the work of Eric Berne. So Freud showed us the unconscious engine of resistance. Adler gives this individual playbook of observable safeguarding tendencies. So we can now see these guards on the castle walls, and we can start understanding their tactics and their strategies, right? They're just trying to keep us safe. But human beings don't live in isolation, and our patterns of self-protection don't just live inside our own heads, they play out in relationships. And if we can see this playing out as a dance, we can often predict the performance. So we look at Eric Berne and his famous book, Games People Play. Berne asks a simple but profound question. Why do so many of our interactions leave us feeling bad even when they seem fine on the surface? And his answer was that we often engage in games. And games are defined loosely as repetitive transactional patterns that look plausible but have a hidden ulterior motive. And the thing about the games is they always end with a familiar negative payoff. So if Adler's safeguarding tendencies are the solo drills of the guards practicing, Burns games are the scripted plays that run with other people. So in every game, we follow this script, and it's a hidden script, and it involves people switching between different roles. And the classic game is the drama triangle, which was later developed by Stephen Cartman. And it goes like this. So you have three roles: the persecutor, who will say, it's all your fault. You have the rescuer, hey, let me help you, but in a way that creates dependency. And then you have the victim, oh, poor me. So we can take Adler's classic example, the yes, but excuse, and see how it becomes part of Eric Burns' game. So we've got a setup. So the setup is the person who's in the victim role presents a problem. I'm so overwhelmed with this project, I'll never get it done. Then we have the invitation. And this is a hook for someone to step in as the rescuer. As the coach or the colleague, we might take the bait. Hey, why don't you try breaking it into smaller tasks? And the switch, the victim responds with the safeguard. Yes, but I don't have the right software. And then we might try another rescue attempt. Well, have you thought about calling IT? I think I know a guy. Another safeguard. Yes, but I know that they're too busy. The payoff. Eventually the rescuer is frustrated, right? We resent when we're offering our expertise and nobody's taking it, especially if you're a professor. So we end up feeling frustrated. We get the sense of being useless, and we might switch to becoming the persecutor. Well, I can't help you if you shoot down every idea. Now here comes that negative reward. The game concludes. The person's hidden goal is achieved, which is their victimhood is confirmed. See, no one can help me, which reinforces their negative concept and excuses them from action. Okay, so this is where our role as a courageous coach becomes crystal clear. Our primary job is to refuse to play the game. So when the person unconsciously invites us onto the drama triangle, we must consciously choose to stay off of it, really noticing. So instead of stepping into the rescuer role with more advice, we step into the adult ego state. So instead of playing, so this is what it looks like. Instead of playing the game, we end up naming the game. So a courageous coach might gently interrupt the pattern by saying, I notice I'm making suggestions and you're explaining why they don't work. It feels like we might be in a yes, but pattern. What's happening here? Or here's another one. Let's pause. What's the real challenge underneath this problem that makes all these solutions seem impossible? So by doing this, for one, we're making sure that the anxiety is not transferred onto us. That's one thing, but also empowering the person that we're with. And this is revolutionary. We stop the music in the middle of this dance and we bring this hidden script into the light. And now we're creating a moment of choice. We show the person that there is a way out of dramatic roles. Often it was hard for me going through school to understand, like, how do we actually get off this drama triangle? And we'd always say it's through taking personal responsibility. But it always was kind of like, but how? But how? So I appreciate having a way to communicate from a place of authenticity and agency, which is really the essence of the courage to be, which is where we're going next. So Byrne gives us this powerful lens for these interpersonal dances that we have that often keep us stuck. If we're stuck in that drama triangle or stuck playing games, and not really getting our needs met directly. So there's a catalyst though that I want to talk about that can actually break these cycles. And we're talking about Jack Mesereau's disorienting dilemma. These are events that are powerful enough to shake someone out of their familiar games and safeguarding tendencies. For Jack Mesereau, he was studying his wife going back to college, and that's what he was noticing was the transformational shift that was occurring for his wife and their cohort. Like that was the disorienting dilemma, was going back to college as an adult. Um, so Jack Mesereau develops his theory of transformative learning. So Adler and Byrne, they give us the machinery of being stuck. What's it like being stuck? And Mesereau shows us the engine of profound change. Mesereau starts with a simple but radical idea that as adults, we don't just learn new information, but we learn new frames of reference. I mentioned my frame of reference in the beginning is there must be more to life than this. And how I've continued to shake that up is to live life as an adventure. And so here we go. What Mesereau says, he calls these meaning perspectives, and they're unconscious assumptions, beliefs, and values that act as a filter for how we interpret every experience in our lives. He wanted, so as we relate this to our castle, we can think of the walls that of our castle as Freud and Adler, and then Mesereau is helping us build more of this fundamental architecture. So from a transformative learning to actually occur, what Mesereau would say is that the foundation must be shaken. So the foundation of our castle actually needs to be shaken if we actually want to have transformative learning. And Mesereau says the very first phase of this process is the disorienting dilemma. So this disorienting dilemma, it's a life event or a piece of feedback that is so contradictory to our existing meaning perspective that it cannot be ignored or easily assimilated. It's often creates a crisis in our understanding. And so for us as coaches, um, our role is to see it as just, this isn't just a problem, but it's actually a crack in someone's worldview. Some examples would be, I just have one here, a dedicated manager who believes I'm a great leader receives devastating 360-degree feedback saying their team feels micromanaged and disempowered. I have my own disorienting dilemmas. I'm married for a second time, so my divorce was quite a disorienting dilemma. Switching careers was quite a disorienting dilemma. Choosing to move from corporate life to then getting a doctorate was also a disorienting dilemma. Having children's a disorienting dilemma. Like it is part of life, and the best that we can be with people in I guess in the pain of being in a disorienting dilemma is how we can be caring. So the dilemma creates what Mesereau called a meaning vacuum. So this is when the old map of how we see the world, our perspective, and our beliefs about the world and what the world believes expects of me and what I expect of the world, when that map no longer works, and we're up against this new territory that is so terrifying. This is where the critical link is. The disorienting dilemma is the ultimate trigger for the fortress's defenses, right? You can just imagine all those guards coming on play. So when the dilemma hits, the person's psyche perceives this fundamental threat. The alarm bells ring. This is when Freud's defense mechanisms mobilize at a deep level. This is when Adler's safeguarding tendencies go on overdrive. This is when Byrne's games people play are most intense. And we can see that all of this is a desperate attempt to patch the crack and restore the old familiar structure. Now, the resistance we see is not just about a goal, but it's about the potential collapse of a world. So as courageous coaches, our role shifts. We are not there to simply solve the problem of the dilemma. We are there to be a steady presence as the person's old world dissolves, and to support them as they build a new, more adaptive one. So how can we help them? We can name the dilemma. We can articulate the specific assumption that has been shattered. Divorce, sickness, loss of job, changing careers, moving to a new country, starting school. We can navigate the chaos. We can tolerate the anxiety of the meaning vacuum without rushing to a cheap solution. Like really being with ourselves and our fear, our anxiety, our upset, the pain, the confusion, the not knowing, the feeling small, the inferiority, all of those feelings. And then we can critically reflect. We can examine the old meaning perspective. Where did this perspective come from? And the real challenge as we're adulting and developing, going through our maturation process, is to really look at, does this worldview and perspective, does it still serve me? Is it still serving me? And my way of being, all these games I'm playing and my defense mechanisms and all, is it still serving me? And so to look at this disorienting dilemma as it is painful, but it's really not the enemy of coaching. It is actually the raw material of transformation, and it's a gift. So if we can make that perspective shift of seeing a disorienting dilemma as a gift, it's a catalyst that makes the courage to change not just desirable, but it's actually necessary. All right, let's keep moving. So we've seen how disorienting dilemmas can shatter a person's worldview. Um, and we can be in this meaning vacuum where this is a space filled with anxiety, where every defense mechanism is in high alert. And this could lead people to have the most critical questions, such as, how do we help someone stand in that storm? And how do we support them to face the anxiety of non-being without running away? So this is where we move into philosophy from our psychology, and we're going to meet Paul Tillich. Paul Tillich was this 20th century philosopher and theologian who grappled with the deepest anxieties of modern life. And his masterpiece was The Courage to Be, which is this foundational book which gives us the ultimate language for what transformation requires. Tillich defines courage in a way that stops us in our tracks. He says, courage is the self-affirmation of one's being in spite of the fact of non-being. And when we translate this, non-being is everything that threatens our sense of self, meaninglessness, guilt, failure, the feedback that shatters our self-concept. It's the void opened up by Mesereau's dilemma. So therefore, courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to affirm yourself even when you feel exposed, inadequate, and afraid. We talk about this is vulnerability. So when we are frozen by a disorienting dilemma, we are facing Tillich's non-being. And anxiety isn't a sign of failure, but it's actually a rational response to a threat against the worldview. Now, our role as coaches is not to make the anxiety disappear, but it's actually to help our clients find the courage to be in spite of it. Tillich breaks down 3 specific anxieties that we can help our clients navigate. One is the anxiety of fate and death. So really looking at our fear of failure, of ruin, of being irrelevant. So the question is like, what if I try and I lose everything? He also looks at the anxiety of guilt and condemnation. So the fear of being judged, of not being good enough. What will people think if I change? And then the last one is the anxiety of meaninglessness. So the fear that the effort is pointless. What does it matter anyway? As coaches, we can become this ground for our clients' courage. We can then provide a container of absolute psychological safety. So this is what Tillich would call the courage to be a part of a community. And we can give them support to risk the courage to be themselves. And we can help people make the choice to affirm their being, to take that one step forward and continue to move forward even when we do feel fear, because their commitment to, and this is where we can remind them of their ideal self, is more powerful. That's the magnet. So TILIC provides the why. Why do we build safety? Why do we navigate defenses? And it's to make space for the single profound courageous act of self-affirmation. And this is the moment where transformation is born. So we've explored a full journey of transformation from shattered worldviews to courageous becoming, but none of this happens without our most fundamental role, which is providing the ground. Amy Edmondson's psychological safety is not just a technique, but it's actually a sacred space where all transformation unfolds. It's what allows TILIC's courage to emerge. And as coaches, we provide this ground through three essential functions. First, we build the container. So this is creating safety that allows the client to take down their protective defenses. Second, we become translators of resistance. So we help clients see their Freudian defenses, their Adlerian safeguarding tendencies, and to see those as not failures, but it's natural, it's protecting you. And then we also can name Burns games so that we can step out of destructive patterns. And then third, we're acting as midwives to courage, where we're holding steady through Mesereau's disorienting dilemmas while holding on to Boyatz's ideal self and keeping it alive so that that's a compelling destination. So in the end, we don't fight the client's resistance. We create such compelling safety and clarity that the client's own courage chooses to emerge. We don't storm the fortress. We make the space outside so inviting that the gates just naturally open. And this is our privilege, to be the ground where our clients discover they had the courage within them all along. So I put together this beautiful model where at the center, our core purpose is to be the ground where transformation takes root. We begin with Boyatzis by inspiring hope through the ideal self, and we honor the real catalyst for change. When resistance appears, we navigate it with curiosity rather than combat. This creates space for clients to find their courage, to choose growth in spite of fear. And throughout this whole cycle, our most vital role is providing psychological safety, which is the container where all authentic change becomes possible. We remind ourselves that we're not here to fix our clients, but to create the conditions where their own courage can emerge. This is the sacred work of courageous coaching. So our final key takeaways. Courageous coaching isn't about having answers. It's about honoring the human journey. Our role is to help clients to listen to their defenses instead of fighting them, name their dilemmas instead of fearing them, choose their courage instead of waiting for fear to disappear, and noticing that the greatest transformation happens not when we remove the struggle, but when we help clients discover their capacity to move through it. So thank you for being stewards of this courageous work. And as we close, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, what resonates most with you, or what questions you might be sitting with. Turn it over to you, Dr. Corey.
Joylyn, thank you so much for providing a novel and intuitive and powerful model for understanding how to help people grow and transform and how to support them along the way. It's fantastic, super exciting tool for us to use and consider. And I look forward to seeing how you apply it. Yeah, I mean, you apply it like daily. I mean, as I'm walking past your office, I hear the pieces that you were talking about today, but I mean, so many directions that you can take it. So thank you for investing in the work and investing in sharing it with us, because it's something that we all can benefit from. And so at this point, we are going to sign off of Joy's presentation, and I'm going to stop the recording and switch over. Our next presentation is Dr. Kelly Corey and sharpening your AI edge. So we'll quit recording, start over again, and then keep moving forward.